Have you ever wondered why certain people affect you so much? Why one person's criticism can ruin your entire day, while another person's criticism hardly bothers you? Most people think that they are simply reacting to the person in front of them, but what they are experiencing has little to do with them. And without realizing it, they are actually relating not only to the person in front of them, but also to important people from their past. And psychoanalysis has a name for this phenomenon. It's called transference. In this video, we'll explore this concept in depth by tracing its origins, examining how it emerged through a series of unexpected clinical discoveries, and understand why it became one of the essential foundations of psychoanalysis. To understand how transference impacts our lives today, we have to go back to the very beginning of modern psychology, to Sigmund Freud in Vienna. The term transference first emerged in Freud's work around 1900, but it didn't mean what it means today. He didn't use it to describe a relationship. Freud actually used it in a more scientific way. He called it the displacement of affect from one idea to another. Affect simply means emotion or feelings. Displacement means moving something from its original source to a new one. So in the beginning, Freud noticed that human brains are incredibly clever at taking a painful, overwhelming emotion, connecting to a hidden, repressed thought, and transferring that emotion onto a completely different, safer idea. As psychoanalysis developed, the meaning of transference became more specific. It came to describe the relationship that develops between a patient and their analyst during sessions. Psychoanalysts noticed that patients often began to experience feelings towards the analyst that seemed far stronger than the actual relationship would justify. And today, this is the main meaning of transference in psychoanalysis. So, transference is the process by which a person unconsciously transfers feelings, expectations, fears, and desires from important people in their past, often parents or caregivers, onto someone in the present. In the psychoanalytic therapy, that person is usually the analyst. In other words, the analyst becomes a kind of emotional screen onto which old relationships patterns are projected. Feelings that originally belonged to earlier relationships begin to reappear in the here and now, often without the patient realizing it. So transference refers to a powerful and often unconscious process in which feelings and expectations from the past are experienced in the present. And the intensity of these reactions can be remarkable because when transference emerges, it can transform an ordinary interaction into a highly charged emotional experience. The person in front of us begins to carry a significance that goes far beyond who they actually are. The story of transference actually starts before psychoanalysis was even fully formed. It begins with a physician named Joseph Breuer, who was a close friend and mentor to Sigmund Freud. Breuer was treating a young woman named in the medical history as Anna O. She was suffering from what was then called hysteria, a collection of severe physical symptoms like paralysis, vision loss, and speech difficulties that had no clear medical explanation. Breuer discovered that if he sat with her and allowed her to talk deeply about her thoughts, her traumas, and her memories, under a light state of hypnosis, her physical symptoms would temporarily disappear. Anna O called it the talking cure and chimney sweeping to describe how much better she felt after talking through her thoughts. For months, Dr. Breuer spent hours and hours treating Anna O. Then the unexpected happened, creating what was later called an untoward event. In other words, Anna O fell deeply in love with Dr. Breuer, and the emotional intensity of her reaction was overwhelming that she even had a severe psychological crisis. She imagined being pregnant and believing that she was having Dr. Breuer's child. He was totally shocked. As a respected doctor in Vienna in the 19th century, this felt wrong and deeply unprofessional that could destroy his career. So, for this reason, Breuer stopped his personal sessions with her and he safely transferred her to a clinic and monitored her care for years. While Dr. Breuer panicked about a ruined reputation, Freud got fascinated by the mystery behind it. As a trained scientist, he believed that if a strange reaction keeps happening over and over with different patients, it isn't a random accident. It is useful data. It is something that needs to be studied. And when Freud started using similar talking methods with his own patients, the exact same thing happened. His patients began redirecting all their intense crushes, deep longings, or anger straight at him. But Freud didn't believe these feelings were about him. He stayed completely neutral. He knew his patients didn't actually know him as a person. They only knew him as their doctor. Therefore, the love, anger, and desperation they directed him couldn't possibly be about Freud. This was a huge breakthrough. Instead of being viewed as a messy, embarrassing accident that ruined a treatment, Transference was seen in a fresh light. It became a recognized psychological reaction that could be observed and studied scientifically, and Freud's relationship with this concept evolved over his career as it changed in three different phases. Phase 1. Transference as a resistance. In the very early days of psychoanalysis, around 1905, Freud first saw transference as resistance. To understand why, we have to look at what Freud was trying to do back then. He believed his main job was to help patients remember deeply buried, painful memories from their childhood. He thought that if a patient could just remember the original trauma, they would be cured. But whenever the analysis got close to those painful memories, the patient would suddenly stop talking about the past. Instead, they would start talking about something else or be completely silent. Freud saw this as a huge problem. The patient was using these intense, current feelings to block themselves from remembering the past. It was a defense mechanism, a way to avoid facing old pain by creating distraction in the present. In his early writings, Freud argued that this transference resistance had to be analyzed and overcome for the treatment to move forward. Phase 2. Transference as an energy source. But as Freud began to completely abandon hypnotic methods, realizing that hypnosis only provided temporary benefits, he found himself needing a new way to get past the patient's psychological defenses. He looked at the clinical room and he realized that he had a great source of power already sitting right in front of him, the transference itself. By the early 1900s, Freud shifted his view of transference as resistance since he started to see these patients' crushes not just as a problem, but as a help. He realized that the warm feelings and trust a patient felt for the doctor was a source of positive energy. The doctor could use this bond to help the patient feel safe because they trusted the doctor and wanted to make them proud, and patients could finally find the courage to lower their resistance and face the deep childhood fears that terrified them. Phase 3. The ultimate living canvas. Eventually, Freud's view went through its profound change. He realized that the real value of these feelings was that they brought the patient's past right into the psychoanalytic relationship with the analyst, happening live in the present moment. Instead of just trying to dig up memories from decades ago, the analyst could watch the patient's history come alive in front of them in the way the patient treated the analyst, as they would automatically repeat how they used to treat the most important people from their childhood, especially their parents. The therapy room became a place where these dynamics could be seen in real time. The past was no longer just something they talked about. The patient was unconsciously repeating the same patterns all over again. This change in his theory didn't happen smoothly. It happened due to a case that forced him to reconsider some of his assumptions. This was the famous case of Dora, whose real name was Ida Bauer. Dora was 18 years old when she started seeing Freud in 1900. She was experiencing various symptoms: a persistent cough, episodes of voice loss, depression, and suicidal thoughts. Her family situation was complicated. Her father was having an affair with the wife of a family friend, a man Freud called Herr K. And when Dora was still a young teenager, Herr K made sexual advances toward her. Dora was angry. She felt used, betrayed, and ignored. Her father refused to believe her version of what Herr K had done to her. Perhaps he was willing to tolerate Herr K's behavior toward Dora in order to continue his own affair. Freud began analyzing Dora with great ambition. He wanted this case to be a model, an ideal demonstration of the psychoanalytic method to be published as a template for future psychoanalysts. But things did not go to plan. After just 11 weeks, Dora ended the analysis without much warning. Freud later regarded this as a therapeutic failure and acknowledged that he had misunderstood crucial aspects of transference. Dora ending the treatment so suddenly forced Freud to change his whole approach. He realized that he failed to recognize that Dora had transferred feelings associated with Herr K onto him, which is called negative transference, where feelings of hostility, resentment, and mistrust are redirected at the analyst. The Dora case also revealed something else. Transference is not only about feelings redirected toward the analyst, but also about how past patterns are repeated in the present. Her end of analysis can be understood not only as a reaction to Freud as a person, but also as a repetition of an old emotional pattern. When she feels misunderstood or not fully heard, she tends to withdraw and break the connection. So in this case, Freud, her father, and Herr K can be seen as part of a repeated emotional structure. The father represents disbelief and lack of protection. Herr K represents intrusion and violation of boundaries. And Freud, in Dora's inner world, becomes part of the same relational field where her experience is not fully recognized. So, through this failure, Freud accidentally made a huge discovery. When patients cannot find the words to explain their past, they act it out instead. Freud recognized that patients do not simply remember the past, they also repeat and relive it within the analytic relationship. The old traumas and wounds become alive, unconsciously performed in the therapy room in real time. Now let's break down the anatomy of transference. Transference, the process by which a patient displaces onto the analyst feelings, ideas, and fantasies which derive from previous figures in the past. In other words, unconsciously treating someone in the present as if they were a crucial figure from the past. like a parent. Transference interpretation. It's when the analyst helps the patient notice unconscious feelings being redirected onto them. For example, the analyst may say, "You are reacting to me as if I were your mother," when she criticized you. Transference neurosis. It's when an old emotional problem gets replayed in the relationship with the analyst. In other words, the analytic session becomes a place where traumas and anxieties are actively played out. Transference relationship is the patient's relationship to the analyst as if they were their father, mother, or early object. This distorted relationship is based entirely on old templates and childhood expectations. Analytical relationship. It is the realistic part of the relationship where the patient recognizes the actual nature of the therapy and the analyst as a real person rather than as a figure from their past. When we are unaware of transference, we often live a script written by our childhood. We look at our partners, friends, or co-workers and accidentally treat them like our parents or our old bullies from the past. We react to a simple text message or a feedback from our boss as if our life is in danger because the child inside once felt their way. But once we understand this concept, everything changes. Next time you feel that overwhelming, familiar, intense emotion that feels a little too much for the situation, you can pause and ask, is this about the person in front of me right now? Or am I just putting an old story onto a new face?